They thought they were firing me, but really they were just activating the trap I'd set 6 months ago. My name is Lynn, and I built a cybersecurity system so advanced it could outsmart hackers, evolve on its own, and predict attacks before they even happened. But what no one at Titan Tech expected, least of all our CEO, was that the system could also detect betrayal. And when he tried to steal it from me, Sentinel Shield didn't just defend itself. It defended me. They thought they were firing me. But really, they were just activating the trap I'd set 6 months ago. My name is Lynn, and until yesterday, I was the lead AI architect at Titan Tech, a promising startup with deep pockets, sharp minds, and a glossy, too-good-to-be-true veneer. I had left a secure, high-paying role at Microsoft to bring my vision to life. That vision was Sentinel Shield, a revolutionary cybersecurity system capable of predicting and neutralizing threats before they even took shape. 18 months. That's how long I spent building Sentinel Shield from scratch, working 80-hour weeks, sleeping in the lab, missing birthdays, holidays, life. Every single line of code, every predictive algorithm was etched from my mind into the machine. It wasn't just software, it was a fortress. It learned, it evolved, and it protected, just like I had to. And for most of that time, I believed Titan Tech was the right home for it. Brandon Holt, the CEO, had all the charisma of a seasoned politician, sharp suits, sharper smiles. He praised my progress, flashed his Hollywood grin in board meetings, and spoke in grand terms about how Sentinel Shield would transform the industry. But behind that smile, something darker brewed. I should have seen it sooner. The signs were there: his sudden interest in the server logs, the unusual after-hours access I detected 6 months ago, and the way his assistant, Rachel, started guarding his calendar like it held state secrets. Still, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I didn't want to believe he was setting me up. But my instincts told me otherwise. So I embedded something extra into Sentinel Shield, a safeguard, just in case. 3 days ago, it hit a major breakthrough. Sentinel Shield intercepted a complex simulated cyber attack without any human input. Perfectly. Flawlessly. It not only defended itself, it exposed weaknesses in our systems I hadn't even taught it to look for. The AI was learning, adapting, becoming smarter by the day. I was ecstatic. I sent the results to Brandon and requested a meeting. His assistant gave me a 15-minute slot the next afternoon. That was my first clue. When I walked into his office, I expected to see him alone. Instead, his legal counsel, Andrea Fields, was seated beside him, face like stone. "Have a seat, Maya," Brandon said, gesturing calmly. My fingers tightened around my laptop. I already knew. Andrea cleared her throat. "Before we get into the Sentinel Shield demo, there are employment matters to address." Brandon slid a document across the table. "Section 14.3 of your contract. Any intellectual property developed using company resources belongs to Titan Tech." I looked down at the paper, my heart pounding. I expected the play, but seeing it in writing still felt like a slap. Sentinel Shield was conceptualized long. "Before I joined Titan," I said carefully, "I have documentation proving that." Andrea didn't even blink. "While the initial concept may have predated your time here, the system as it currently exists was built using company equipment, infrastructure, and support." Brandon leaned in, the false warmth gone. "Let's not make this difficult. You'll receive a $300,000 success bonus. That's more than fair." Fair? 18 months, sleepless nights, missed life milestones, a system that would be worth billions. And they wanted to hand me a severance check and cut me out. "We're transitioning." "You out, effective immediately," Andrea added coldly. "Your badge will be deactivated in an hour." Brandon smiled that wolf's grin. "Congratulations, Maya. Your work is done." But what he didn't know was that I wasn't done. I handed over my laptop without protest and walked out under the watchful eyes of security, cardboard box in my arms. Just another engineer being quietly erased. They thought I was defeated. But Sentinel Shield was already watching, already listening, already adapting. The night I was fired, I didn't panic. I didn't run to a lawyer or scream at the injustice. Instead, I did something far simpler. I waited. After the meeting with Brandon and Andrea, I could have lashed out. I could have stormed into the boardroom demanding justice, threatening lawsuits, but they were prepared for that. They thought I'd be the typical fired employee, angry, emotional, desperate to fight for my creation. Instead, I calmly walked out of the building and went home. Takeout. A mindless sitcom. Nothing. I was silent. But inside, my mind was a storm. I knew what they would do next. I knew they'd take Sentinel Shield, claim it as their own, and present it to investors as Titan Tech's groundbreaking solution. Brandon would sit at the head of the table, smug and confident, claiming credit for something I'd built. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was that they didn't understand just how much Sentinel Shield had learned. They didn't realize that I had been teaching it to think, to predict, not just external threats but internal ones as well. 6 months ago, after a suspicious after-hours access to my secure server, I'd added something extra to the code. A small piece of programming designed to protect both the system and myself. A failsafe. It wasn't just a safeguard against hackers. It was a defense against betrayal. And it would activate the moment they tried to take control of my creation. At exactly 9:30 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. "Brandon wants to see you," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "It's urgent." I glanced at the clock. 10:00 p.m. The demo was tomorrow, and I knew Brandon was already in a panic. I could feel it in my bones. They needed me, but they didn't realize how badly they needed me. A car was already on its way. 40 minutes later, I was back at Titan Tech, walking through the sleek hallways with security at my heels. The building felt colder this time, quieter. My footsteps echoed louder as I approached the conference room. Brandon was there, alone at the head of the table. His tie was loose, his hair disheveled, his face pinched with stress. The corporate mask was gone. He looked like a man about to snap. "Fix it," he demanded as soon as I entered. I took my time settling into a chair, deliberately slow. I wasn't in a hurry. "Fix what exactly?" I asked innocently, even though I already knew. I kept my voice calm, controlled. He wanted me to feel the pressure. But I wasn't the one with my back against the wall. Brandon's eyes flashed with barely contained rage. "Don't play games, Maya. The demo, it's a disaster. The system crashed. It started flagging threats that aren't real. False positives. It's unusable." I arched an eyebrow. "Really? Sounds like a technical issue. Have you tried turning it off and on again?" I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Brandon slammed his hand on the table, his anger seeping through the cracks of his calm facade. "This isn't funny. We've got millions on the line. Investors are flying in tomorrow, and I'm getting calls from everyone. Legal, finance, you name it. If we can't fix this..." I sat back in my chair, pretending to think. "Have you tried looking at the error logs? Or maybe running a diagnostic?" I feigned innocence, but I could see it in his eyes. He was realizing it now. His cool composure was gone, replaced by panic. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as I'd designed it. I leaned forward, keeping my voice even. "You see, Brandon, the thing about Sentinel Shield is that it doesn't just protect against external threats. It learns. It adapts. And if you really think about it, your demo crashed because the system recognized a threat within its own network." His face drained of color. "You taught it to spy on us," he whispered, his voice tight with disbelief. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The system had already done it for me. Every intrusion, every unauthorized access, every modified document, it had all been logged, neatly compiled into reports with timestamps, access logs, and recorded keystrokes. Everything. I had embedded these surveillance protocols long before Titan Tech ever tried to take what was mine. The moment Brandon accessed my secure server 6 months ago, I knew he'd make his move. And I was prepared. Brandon's breath hitched as the realization settled in. The system wasn't malfunctioning. It had exposed him. And now it was documenting every breach, every lie, every unethical action. All neatly presented for anyone who knew how to look. He slammed his fist on the table, his eyes wild. "What do you want?" I smiled, a calm, almost pitying smile. "I want what's mine. Full recognition as Sentinel Shield's creator and primary architect, 50% ownership of all related patents and intellectual property, a board seat to oversee its ethical implementation, and $10 million in compensation for your attempt to steal what I built." Brandon's face twisted. "That's extortion." "No," I corrected smoothly. "That's negotiation. Extortion would be me sending these reports directly to your investors. I'd bet they'd find the internal ethical breach reports very enlightening." For a long moment, Brandon just stared at me, his jaw clenched, the muscles in his neck bulging. I could see the struggle. He wanted to fight back, to deny me. But deep down, he knew he was trapped. Finally, he exhaled sharply, a bitter sigh escaping his lips. "Can you fix it? Can you fix the system before tomorrow's demo?" I leaned back, crossing my arms. Sentinel Shield doesn't need fixing. It just needs the proper authorization protocols. Right now, it's flagging unauthorized commands because I was removed from the authentication chain. I pulled out a small flash drive from my pocket and placed it on the table between us. "This contains a proper authentication update. Consider it a good faith gesture toward our new partnership." Brandon stared at the flash drive, then at me. "You planned this all along." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The system had done the planning. I had just made sure it would protect me when I needed it most. The next morning, I arrived at Titan Tech as a newly appointed co-founder and chief technology officer. The halls that once felt cold and impersonal now seemed like mine. Every step I took felt like a victory, though it was the quietest of victories. It was the kind of victory where you don't shout in triumph, but rather smile to yourself, knowing you've outsmarted your enemies without them even realizing it yet. Brandon and I walked into the investors' meeting together, but I could see the tension radiating off him. He couldn't hide the tightness in his jaw, the nervous glances at the investors seated around the conference table. His hands kept fiddling with his tie, his usual polished confidence replaced with a barely contained anxiety. I walked in, head held high like I belonged there. And I did. I built this. It wasn't just code, it wasn't just a system, it was my vision, my gift to the world. And now it was time to show the world what it could do. Brandon introduced me to the investors with that tight, forced smile of his. It was strained, like a man trying to smile his way out of a noose. I could see in his eyes that he was counting on the demo to go off without a hitch, hoping that somehow I'd just fixed everything. As we walked to the demo room, I could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a product launch. It was a reckoning. For Brandon, for Titan Tech, and for everyone who had ever doubted me. This was the moment where I would take back control. The investors took their seats, eager to see what Titan Tech had in store. Brandon took his position, talking the usual investor language: market size, ROI, scalability, yada yada. I stood silently by his side, waiting for the moment to arrive. Then, it was my turn. I looked at the large screen in front of me, where a simulation of a cyber attack was prepared. The system was set to test Sentinel Shield's response. With a simple click, the demo began. The attackers began to breach the system, sending waves of simulated cyber threats towards Titan Tech's network. Every move was intercepted, every attempt blocked. But this time, something new happened. Sentinel Shield didn't just neutralize the threats, it adapted. As the attack unfolded, the system began learning. It identified patterns, countermeasures, and even unexpected anomalies that no one had anticipated. The system didn't just respond, it anticipated the next wave of threats and took them out before they could even form. As the final simulated attack was neutralized, I turned to face the room. The investors were silent. They were impressed. I could see it in their eyes. They were sold. This wasn't just another cybersecurity solution. This was the future. A young investor, clearly awestruck, turned to Brandon. "This is amazing. What inspired its development?" Brandon hesitated, just long enough for me to savor the moment. "It was actually Maya's brainchild," he said, his voice betraying his frustration. "Her vision from the beginning. Titan Tech just provided the environment for that vision to flourish. I couldn't help the smile that tugged at my lips. It was sweet. That was the moment. The moment he had to admit in front of everyone that this was my creation, that I was the architect of the future of cybersecurity. The demo was flawless. As the investors clapped and praised the system, I let the moment wash over me, but not too long. I had work to do. The system was more than just a product to be sold. It was my legacy. And in that room, I knew I had secured my place at the top. As the meeting came to an end, Brandon pulled me aside. His eyes were burning with a mixture of frustration and reluctant admiration. "You played this perfectly," he said, his voice low. "But you're not going to get away with this." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm not? I think I just did." He clenched his jaw but didn't argue. There was nothing left for him to say. He had to live with the reality that I owned this, my creation, my legacy, my future. I could already see the gears turning in his head, trying to figure out how to regain control. But he couldn't. Not anymore. Not after everything he'd done. The investors left, buzzing with excitement about the potential of Sentinel Shield. I knew what came next. Meetings, contracts, partnerships. But I wasn't just going to play along. I had a new role to step into, one that would put me in charge. It wasn't just about the code anymore. It was about maintaining control. The following days were a blur of meetings and negotiations. I secured my place as co-founder. My name was on the patents. My face appeared in press releases. But even though I had won this battle, I knew the war was far from over. Brandon wasn't going to give up that easily. He would find a way to try to regain his dominance. But I had Sentinel Shield, and no one, not even Brandon Holt, could take it from me now. 3 months had passed since my victory at Titan Tech. Sentinel Shield had been implemented across major corporations, preventing countless cyber attacks and solidifying its place as the gold standard in cybersecurity. The system was so precise, so adaptive, that it started to attract attention from governments and multinational corporations alike. But despite the accolades, the recognition, and the financial success, I couldn't shake the feeling that Brandon was still lurking in the shadows, plotting his next move. It wasn't paranoia. It was awareness. Brandon had always been ambitious. His obsession with control had always been his driving force, and I had no doubt that he would stop at nothing to try and reclaim what he thought was his, Sentinel Shield. What he didn't realize, though, was that I had already accounted for that. The sun was setting one evening when I received an unexpected call. It was from Rachel, Brandon's assistant. "Maya, Brandon needs to see you. It's urgent." I glanced at the time, 9:30 p.m. "I'll be there in 40 minutes. I grabbed my jacket and headed out. But this time I didn't feel the same sense of fear or anxiety I had before. I was prepared. As I arrived at Titan Tech's sleek glass building, I couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. It was the end of an era for me, and while I had triumphed over Brandon once, there was one more thing to resolve. This wasn't just about my place at the company. It was about my control over the future of Sentinel Shield. Inside the building, security escorted me through the familiar hallways, and I could sense the tension in the air. The whole atmosphere felt charged. When I entered the conference room, there was only Brandon sitting at the head of the table. His hair was disheveled, and his usual polished demeanor had completely fallen apart. "What's going on, Brandon?" I asked, my voice steady, though I could see the panic in his eyes. He gestured to the chair across from him, his face a mask of frustration. "Sit down," I did, folding my arms. "What's the emergency?" Brandon didn't waste time. His voice was tight as he leaned forward. "You sabotaged the demo!" he spat, his face flushed with anger. I raised an eyebrow. "Sabotaged? How?" He slammed his hand on the table. "The system crashed. It started generating false positives. Threats that weren't even real. You've ruined everything." I leaned back in my chair, my posture relaxed. "Brandon, how could I have sabotaged anything? I haven't been here for a full day. I wasn't even in the building." "Don't play games with me, Maya," he growled. "This is serious. We've got investors breathing down our necks. There are millions of dollars on the line. What the hell did you do?" I kept my voice calm, almost bored. Sounds like a technical issue to me, I said, feigning innocence. Have you tried turning it off and on again? His eyes narrowed dangerously. Stop it, fix it. I couldn't help the small smile that tugged at my lips. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment where the entire house of cards Brandon had built came crashing down. His attempt to take the credit for Sentinel Shield, to push me out and steal everything, had been his final mistake. I didn't sabotage anything, I said, my tone even. Sentinel Shield is working exactly as designed. It's an adaptive system. It learns from every threat it encounters. It doesn't just protect, it identifies threats where they exist, whether they're external or internal. Brandon's face drained of color. The realization dawned on him, and he looked like he might choke on his own words. You taught it to spy on us? He asked, barely able to form the sentence. I nodded slowly. I taught it to recognize threats, and that includes threats from within Titan Tech. Brandon's eyes flicked to the monitor on the wall, where the system logs and reports were displayed. You can't prove that, he said, his voice low and dangerous. I smiled. Actually, I don't need to. The system did it for me. I pulled a small flash drive from my pocket and set it down on the table. This contains the proper authentication update that will fix your demo problems. Consider it a good faith gesture toward our new partnership. His hand hovered over the drive but didn't reach for it. Instead, he glared at me, his jaw clenched in disbelief. You planned this all along. No, I corrected him, my voice firm. I hoped it wouldn't be necessary, but when I found out 6 months ago that you accessed my secure development server, I prepared. Sentinel Shield has built-in safeguards for a reason. Brandon's eyes were wild. You knew? You knew I was trying to cut you out? I stood up, ready to leave. I didn't know. But Sentinel Shield predicts threats. It recognizes patterns. I guess some of that rubbed off on its creator. I turned to walk out, but before I could reach the door, Brandon's voice stopped me. What do you want, Maya? I turned back, locking eyes with him. I want full recognition as Sentinel Shield's creator, 50% ownership of all related patents and intellectual property, a board seat to oversee its ethical implementation, and $10 million in compensation for your attempt. To push me out! Brandon's face twisted with rage. That's extortion. I raised an eyebrow. No, that's negotiation. Extortion would be me sending those reports directly to the investors and the SEC. Brandon stared at me for what felt like an eternity, and I could see him calculating, weighing his options. Finally, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Fine, he muttered. I'll sign whatever you want. I nodded, walking out of the conference room without a second glance. The deal was done. I had won. The next day, the contract was signed. I was officially a co-founder of Titan Tech, the primary architect behind Sentinel Shield. But more importantly, I had secured my place as its true creator. As for Brandon, he was still CEO, still the face of Titan Tech to the public. But we both knew that the real power lay with me. As I walked into the boardroom for the next meeting, I couldn't help but think back to the journey I'd taken to get here. The betrayals, the doubts, the fears. But now I stood at the top, with full control of the system that had changed the cybersecurity world. And that was the greatest victory of all.